We're on Psalm 68, and we're going to cover 68 and 69 tonight, and these have some very interesting features in them that I think we'll enjoy discussing. In verse 1 of Psalm 68, let Elohim arise, let his enemies be scattered, let those who hate him flee before him. Now this is a victory psalm written by David. We're not positive when it was written, but it likely is referring to David's procession that he made with the Ark of the Covenant from the house of Obed-Edom to Jerusalem. And that's in 2 Samuel 6, verse 12, it's mentioned. Now, it was told King David, saying, Yahweh has blessed the house of Obed-Edom and all that belongs to him on account of the Ark of Elohim. And David went and brought up the Ark of Elohim from the house of Obed-Edom into the city of David with gladness. So we think that's probably the background here as to why he wrote this, this psalm.
How did the ark end up with Obed-Edom?
Well, the Philistines took it.
And how did he, when somebody touched it?
Yeah, I think that's why it stayed at Obed-Edom, is because someone touched it. They were on their way back, and then it kind of stopped there. It was teetering, and they had to make different arrangements. Verses 2 through 6, as smoke is driven away, so drive them away. As wax melts before the fire, so let the wicked perish before Elohim. But let the righteous be glad. Let them exult before Elohim. Yes, let them rejoice with gladness. Sing to Elohim, sing praises to his name. Lift up a song for him who rides through the deserts, whose name is Yahweh, and exult before him. A father of the fatherless and a judge for the widows is Elohim in his holy habitation. Elohim makes a home for the lonely. He leads out the prisoners into prosperity, and only the rebellious dwell in a parched land. David references deliverance from Egypt when he says prisoners were led into prosperity and the rebellious died in the parched land, and that's what happened in the wilderness. Verses 7 and 8. O Elohim, when you did go forth from your people, when you did march through the wilderness, Selah. The earth quaked, the heavens also dropped rain at the presence of Elohim. Sinai itself quaked at the presence of Elohim, the Elohim of Israel. So when it talks about the quaking of the earth, that's what happened at Mount Sinai. In Exodus 19, verse 18. Now, Mount Sinai was all in smoke because Yahweh descended upon it in fire, and its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked violently. And when it says the mountain quaked, I'm sure all the land in the area quaked. Verse 9, you did shed abroad a plentiful rain, O Elohim. You did confirm your inheritance when it was parched. The plentiful rain, that's the manna and the quail for Israel in the wilderness. Verses 10 and 11. Your creatures settled in it. You did provide in your goodness for the poor, O Elohim. Adonai gives the command. The women who proclaim the good tidings are a great host. After military victories, it wasn't uncommon for the women to sing and dance. We read in Exodus 15, verses 20 and 21. And Miriam, the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took the timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dancing. And Miriam answered them, sing to Yahweh, for he is highly exalted. The horse and his rider he has hurled into the sea. Okay, let's keep going in Psalm 68, verses 12 through 14. Kings of armies flee, they flee, and she who remains at home will divide the spoil. When you lie down among the sheepfolds, you are like the wings of a dove covered with silver, and its pinions with glistening gold. When the Almighty scattered the kings there, it was snowing in Zalman. He's talking about when he dispersed the kings that were in Canaan. He said it was like snowflakes being driven by the wind. Verses 15 and 16. A mountain of Elohim is the mountain of Bashan. A mountain of many peaks is the mountain of Bashan. Why do you look with envy, O mountains with many peaks? at the mountain which Yahweh or Elohim has desired for his abode. Surely Yahweh will deliver there or dwell there forever. We don't know anything about the mountains of Bashan, but oops. I thought it was a lawnmower about to burst through the wall. We don't know anything about the mountains of Bashan, but it's a personification here. It's a metaphor that these mountains are envious that Elohim chose Mount Zion in Jerusalem over them. Verses 17 and 18. The chariots of Elohim are myriads, thousands upon thousands. Adonai is among them as at Sinai in holiness. You have ascended on high, you have led captive thy captives. You have received gifts among men, even among the rebellious also, so that Yahweh Elohim may dwell there. Okay, now this passage, people want to think, well, this is giving us a picture of Elohim in heaven with his armies. It appears that what's being said here is that he's taken back his people who were prisoners taken captive, and that he received gifts among men, even rebellious men, so that Elohim may dwell in heaven. And that's kind of how it reads, especially with the inserted words there. Kind of out of context from what we've been reading. You know, we've been reading this about how they're delivered from Egypt, how Israel was, they wandered the wilderness. Elohim dwells on Mount Zion. Let's take a look at, if we take it into account the previous couple verses and remove the inserted words, this tells a different story. A mountain of Elohim is the mountain of Bashan. A mountain of many peaks is the mountain of Bashan. Why do you look with envy, O mountains with many peaks, at the mountain which Elohim has desired for his abode? Surely Yahweh will dwell forever. The chariots of Elohim are myriads, thousands upon thousands. Yahweh, Adonai is among them, Sinai, in holiness. You have ascended on high. You have led captive your captives. You have received gifts among men, even the rebellious also, that Yahweh Elohim may dwell there. Now, if you notice, I inserted Moses in there, and that's there's a reason for that. This whole passage here is saying that the mountains of Bashan are metaphorically looking with envy at Mount Sinai, where Elohim dwelt. He dwelt there, and he led the captive Israelites out of Egypt, he being Moses. Moses ascended on high, went to Mount Sinai. Moses led captives out of Egypt. Moses received gifts among men in order that Yahweh may dwell among the people. That's really what's being stated here. The problem with the first interpretation, the inserted words here, is that Paul quoted this and turned it into a Christian dogma. Now, does anybody remember anything about that? It's in particularly verse 18. Paul quotes this passage in Ephesians chapter 4, and he's talking about himself being a prisoner. Okay, so let's start at Ephesians 4. Look at verse 1. I, therefore, the prisoner of Adonai, entreat you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling with which you've been called. He's speaking of himself being a prisoner here, and apparently he felt like he was a prisoner in the same way Israel was a prisoner in Egypt. That's spoken of here in verses 17 and 18. Then he quotes part of verse 18 discussing how Elohim has delivered his people and gave them gifts similar to the way Elohim gave them to Moses. That's in verses 7 through 10. But to each one of us was given according to the measure of Messiah's gift. Therefore it said, when he ascended on high, he led captive a host of captives and gave gifts to men. Now this, he ascended, what does it mean except that he also descended into the lower parts of the earth? He who descended is himself also he who ascended far above the heavens, that he might fill all things. Now here in this passage, I'd mentioned to you, he ascended on high, he led the captive, a host of captives, that's Moses. And he gave gifts to men. and that's Moses. Here, it gets a little bit different. Well, Paul continues here, and he talks about the gifts given to men through Messiah. Verse 11, he gave some as apostles, some as prophets, some as evangelists, some as pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints for the work of service to the building up of the body of Messiah. He's equating Messiah to Moses. Of course, he's the prophet like Moses. He's saying this is a reference not only to Moses, but to Messiah also. That he gave gifts to men, and these gifts were the blessings, the blessing of the breath of the Father. And through that, some are prophets, some are apostles, some evangelists, some pastors, some teachers. Does that make sense? Did I go over that a little bit too? Did I gloss over too much? Okay. Paul here, verse 1, he's a prisoner. Okay? And then he's equating himself to Israel as being a prisoner in Egypt. And then he goes down, each of us has been given gifts, is what he says in verse 7. Therefore, when it talks about Moses, when he ascended up on Mount Sinai, he led captive a host of captives. He gave gifts to men. Messiah, in the same way, did the same thing. After he ascended, who did he send? He sent the breath of the Father, the helper. In verse 9, he ascended. What does it mean except that he had also descended into the lower parts of the earth? Well, he died first. Then he ascended. He who descended is himself also he who ascended far above the heavens, that he might fill all things, that he might send the Spirit of the Father. Okay, and through the Spirit of the Father, some of us are apostles, some are prophets, some evangelists, some pastors, some teachers, for the equipping of the saints for the work of service, for the building up the body of Messiah. Is that a little better?
But you said to some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors, some teachers.
Yes.
Are there some that didn't get one of these gifts?
Well, he's saying they're all different. We're gifted differently.
I understand they're all different.
Yeah.
But does that mean that we fall into one of those categories?
Not necessarily, no. Not everyone fits into one of those categories. Right. Right. And apparently in Ephesus there was a discussion about people doing everything. And he said, well, no, we don't all do everything. And that's what I believe he's pointing out here. Now, how was this turned into a Christian dogma? I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you the notes on the Believer's Study Bible. Look at the New King James Version of verses 8 and 9. Therefore he says, when he ascended on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts to men. Now this, he ascended, what does it mean but that he first descended into the lower parts of the earth? Here's the Believer's Study Bible notes, which is why I implore you, don't ever buy a study Bible, okay? The notes will ruin you if you actually read them. Yeah. Look at what they say here. The reference to Jesus' ascension in Psalm 68, verse 18, presupposes his coming down to earth from heaven. Therefore, the lower parts of the earth probably is a reference to the incarnation of Christ. This difficult and debated passage has been linked by some with 1 Peter 3, 18 through 20, and is thought to reflect a ministry of Jesus immediately following his death, but prior to his resurrection, in which he descended into Sheol or Hades to announce the accomplishment of atonement to the lost, as well as to the old saint or the dead saints of the Old Testament. He then led captivity captive. He led the Old Testament saints into heaven's rest. Okay, have you heard that? When Jesus died, he went down to hell, and he did an end zone dance. Okay, and it took 3 days. It was a good dance. And he took the Old Testament saints out of this place called Abraham's bosom, okay, which was a place of comfort. And he led them up to heaven. All right? That's where they get that from Ephesians 4, verses 8 and 9.
You know,
I think your buddy could have written that.
that's what I'm fostering there, you know. The problem I have with that is that we all will awaken and rise to it, except for if it happened this second, within the next couple
Right.
of minutes, we are still alive. So I'm not talking about those that have died. They're asleep. They've been asleep, and they'll all wake up at one time.
Yeah.
Now, if this were to happen, I'd be upset that somebody woke me up to tell me, "Hey, I've got it all taken care of. Go back to sleep."
Right. That's a good point.
What's the purpose of him descending to tell them this
Right.
when they'll find out soon enough, along with all the rest of us?
Let's look at the alternate here. This is continued. Another explanation that seems to have fewer explanatory difficulties is that the captivity which Christ led captive in his resurrection and ascension is the awful power of Satan, sin, death, and the grave. The descent into the lower parts of the earth is a reference to his entombment in the heart of the earth. From this he arose and ascended in unparalleled victory. That's not quite as wacky as the other one. Now, take a look at the Ryrie Study Bible. Verse 8 of Ephesians 4, he led captive a host of captives. Paul uses an illustration from Psalm 68, verse 18, in which the triumphant warrior is elevated when he returns with a host of prisoners, receiving gifts from the conquered people, distributing gifts to his followers. Messiah conquered Satan and all that had conquered us. So, it's all, once again, very, very spiritual. Maybe we're not spiritual enough to fully grasp the spirituality of this. Right. Religiously spiritual. That's what you don't get it. Yeah. Okay, we'll move on now. Anyway, it's pretty much about Mount Sinai, okay, and then Moses leading people out and that type of thing. And like I said, Paul quoted it because he looked at Messiah as the prophet like Moses and how he led. He ascended on high also. First he had come down to earth and had died, and then he ascended up and gave us gifts.
Paralleling a more current event with a less further.
Yes, paralleling the events. That's right. That's what he's doing. Verse 19, blessed be Adonai, who daily bears our burden, the Elohim who is our salvation. That Hebrew word for Yeshua, Selah. You know how many times you see in the Psalms, Yeshua is our salvation? You see it in Isaiah too. It's fascinating to me, and I think no coincidence. Verses 20 and 21. Elohim to us is a Elohim of deliverances, and Yahweh, Adonai belong escapes. To Adonai Yahweh belong escapes from death. Surely Elohim will shatter the head of his enemies, the hairy crown of him who goes on in his guilty deeds. Elohim is an Elohim of deliverances. If we have ever escaped death, it's because of him. David then talks about how Elohim will shatter his enemies. Verses 22 and 23. Adonai said, I will bring them back from Bashan. I'll bring them back from the depths of the sea, that your foot may shatter them in blood. The tongue of your dogs may have its portion from your enemies. So it's Elohim who will deliver our enemies to us in order for justice to occur. That's what we always want, is justice, not revenge. Verse 24. They've seen your procession, O Elohim, the procession of my Elohim, my king, into the sanctuary. The singers went on, the musicians after them in the midst of the maidens beating tambourines. Bless Elohim and the congregations, even Yahweh, you who are of the fountain of Israel. There's Benjamin, the youngest, ruling them, the princes of Judah in their throng, the princes of Zebulun, the princes of Naphtali. Okay, in the procession of Elohim, all of Israel is represented, from small Benjamin and large Judah, both in the south, to Zebulun and Naphtali, all in the north. So if we're talking about this procession of Elohim, where's the church? We have all the tribes of Israel in this procession of Elohim. You can look. It's not there. Verses 28 through 30. Your Elohim has commanded your strength. Show yourself strong, O Elohim, who has acted on our behalf. Because of your temple at Jerusalem, kings will bring gifts to you. Rebuke the beasts in the reeds, the herd of bulls with the calves of the peoples. Trampling underfoot the pieces of silver, he has scattered the peoples who delight in war. David calls for Elohim to show his strength against his enemies. The beasts in the reeds, that's a reference to Egypt. Yeah. Yes. Verse 31, envoys will come out of Egypt. Ethiopia will quickly stretch out her hands to Elohim. Sing to Elohim, O kingdoms of the earth. Sing praises to Adonai, Selah. To him who rides upon the highest heavens, which are from ancient times. Behold, he speaks forth with his voice, a mighty voice. Ascribe strength to Elohim. His majesty is over Israel, and his strength is in the skies. O Elohim, you are awesome from the sanctuary. The Elohim of Israel himself gives strength and power to the people. Blessed be Elohim. So David ends this psalm. He talks about the strength and power of Elohim. And now we're going to go on to Psalm 69. This is a very interesting psalm. Many people say that Psalm 69 gives us an insight into the childhood and young adulthood of Yeshua in a similar way that Psalm 22 gives us insight into his crucifixion, his death. They say Psalm 69 shows us how he was raised, about his suffering and his life before he started teaching. Now, this psalm is quoted in all four Gospels. It's quoted in the book of Acts and also in Romans. It is the second most quoted psalm in the Brit Hadashah. Number one being Psalm 22. That's okay. Four Gospels, Acts, and Romans.
Okay, thank you.
And like I said, it's the second most quoted. The first most quoted being Psalm 22. Here's where a problem is, or could be. If a verse is attributed to Messiah in one of the Gospels, what do you do with the verses before and after that verse in Psalm 69? So is the whole psalm about him? We're going to take a look at it. We'll explore that possibility. Verse 1 is a psalm of David. Save me, O Elohim, from the waters, for the waters have threatened my life. So David's suffering here, and he's drowning in his own sufferings. Out of his agony, he cries out. Verse 2, I've sunk in deep mire, and there's no foothold. I've come into deep waters, and a flood overflows me. So he's talking about how he's drowning in his misery. However, as with the case with a lot of David's psalms, we don't know the exact situation that he's in at this time. It could be a number of them, and we're not told when exactly. Verse 3, I'm weary with my crying, my throat is parched, my eyes fail while I wait for my Elohim. So David is visibly shaken by the predicament that his enemies have put him in. Verse 4, those who hate me without a cause are more than the hairs of my head. Those who would destroy me are powerful, being wrongfully my enemies. What I did not steal, I then have to restore. Well, Yeshua quoted this verse and applied it to himself. He says that he was hated without a cause. That's in John 15. We're going to start at verse 20 to see where he's going with this. Yeshua said, remember the word that I said to you, a slave is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they'll also persecute you. If they kept my word, they'll keep yours also. But all these things they will do to you for my name's sake, because they do not know the one who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have sin, but now they have no excuse for their sin. He who hates me hates my Father also. If I had not done among them the works which no one else did, they would not have sin. But now they both have seen and hated me and my Father as well. And they have done this in order that the word may be fulfilled that is written in their Torah, they hated me without a cause. So he says this applies to him. This passage does. Verse 5, O Elohim, it is you who do know my folly, and my wrongs are not hidden from you. It's difficult to apply anything other than the mentioned verses to Yeshua. And why is that an issue? Why? Who's that worried about it? Have you ever heard of anti-missionaries? You've never heard of anti-missionaries. There are people that go to Israel in particular, and they're trying to show the Messiah to the Jewish people. And there are Jews that battle them in this, and they're called anti-missionaries. That on the Jewish side, showing where the New Testament's wrong and bad. Okay? Some are being ministered to, and then others are battling back. Rabbis in particular. Yeah, those are the anti-missionaries. Have you ever heard of Tobias Singer? Lewis gave me a lot of his material, and I studied it, and it was fascinating how this man could pick apart things.
Who is he? I've heard the name, but I don't really know anything.
He is an anti-missionary in Israel, and he is he knows the Brit Hadashah very well and likes to tear it apart. He says, well, John says that they've hated me without a cause is applicable to him. Well, what about his sin that's talked about in the very next verse? All my wrongs are not hidden from you. Doesn't that apply to him also? Yeah, he's saying, right, why wouldn't you attribute this to Messiah also? If verse 4 is about him. It's not. Okay, Yeshua said he's gonna give one sign to this generation. What was that one sign? I'm only going to give one sign to this generation. Nope. Close. Close. Going to give you the sign of Jonah. Remember? I'm going to give one sign here. Okay? Going to spend.
How would we know he said this? And that's exactly what he said.
Right. So was Yeshua swallowed by a whale? But he said it applied to him, didn't he?
But he was swallowed.
Oh, but that's not a whale. There's symbolism involved. Some things will apply, others not necessarily. David goes through these horrible things with his enemies, with his family, with others, in order that in some ways he can model the Messiah. Okay? In some ways. But does that mean that Yeshua threw a rock and killed an 11-foot giant? No, it does not. But David went through a lot of things in order for him to write about things which were to come in some ways, but not in every way. It's logical to say the quotes in the Brit Hadashah can be attributed to Messiah. But you can't give yourself license to say, oh, well, all the Psalms speak about Messiah. They don't all. They don't all. And it's difficult to go far beyond that which is specifically stated as being quoted. But people do. And we'll see some here. Psalm 69, verses 6 through 8. May those who wait for you not be ashamed through me, O Adonai, Yahweh of hosts. May those who seek you not be dishonored through me, O Elohim of Israel. Because for your sake I've borne reproach, dishonor has covered my face. I've become estranged from my brothers and an alien to my mother's sons. Many Christians, teachers claim this verse definitely points to ridicule that Yeshua suffered in his childhood. Okay, they point to this psalm right here. I'm not saying, they point out this is evidence of the virgin birth. He talks about his mother's sons and not his father's sons. But you know, this verse is not quoted anywhere in the Brit Hadashah. The picture of ostracism is of David and the poor relationship he had with his brothers. Because of some kind of questionable birth. And we talked about that in Psalm 51, the first 5 verses. Be gracious to me, O Elohim, according to your loving kindness, according to the greatness of your compassion, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions and my sin is ever before me. Against you, you only I sinned and done what is evil in your sight, so that you are justified when you do speak and blameless when you do judge. Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin my mother conceived me. Now, that's something between David and his family, and I don't know how else to reconcile that. But to say this right here, how could you say this is definitely about Messiah, but that's not? You're saying verse 4 and verse 8 are, but verse 5 isn't? So you can't just take them all and say this is about Messiah. But a lot of people do that. Yeah.
Even though Messiah was a prophet like Moses.
He was a prophet like Moses.
Right.
Not identical to.
Because Moses spoke to him.
Right.
And so he didn't get it. So he made some mistakes.
Yes, he did. He made some mistakes. Right.
Messiah did not. But nevertheless, there's so much similarities that he is a prophet like.
There's enough similarities that you can definitely tell he is the one like Moses. And he is the one spoken of in many of the Psalms, in parts of them. Verse 9, for zeal for your house has consumed me, and the reproaches of those who reproach you have fallen on me. Well, when Yeshua cleansed the temple, this was quoted. In John 2, verses 16 and 17. And to those who were selling the doves, he said, take these things away. Stop making my Father's house a house of merchandise. His disciples remembered that it was written, zeal for your house will consume me. Paul quotes the latter part of the verse as being made full in Messiah. Yeshua didn't come to please himself. He took on the reproach of those who reproached Elohim. In Romans 15, the first 3 verses. Now we who are strong ought to bear the weaknesses of those without strength, and not just to please ourselves. Let each of us please his neighbor for his good, to his edification. For even Messiah did not please himself, but as it is written, the reproaches of those who reproached you fell upon me. See, Paul noticed some areas where it applied too. Verses 10 and 11, but when I wept in my soul with fasting, it became my reproach. When I made sackcloth my clothing, I became a byword to them. David said, I became a byword to them. That's possibly a reference to the street talk that may have been started by his brothers. You know, it's got different origins. So the bastard type talk. Verse 12. Those who sit in the gate talk about me, and I'm the song of drunkards. Those sitting at the gate, they are the judges or the officials of the city. See, the best people in town were against David. And it says he was the song of drunkards. So everybody from the judges of the city down to the drunks in the streets were ridiculing David. Verse 13, but as for me, my prayer is to you, O Yahweh, at an acceptable time, O Elohim, in the greatness of your loving kindness, answer me with your saving truth. Part of this is quoted and paraphrased in 2 Corinthians 6, verses 1 through 4. We read, in working together with him, we also urge you not to receive the grace of Elohim in vain, for he says, at the acceptable time I listened to you, and on the day of salvation I helped you. Behold, now is the acceptable time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. Giving no cause for offense in anything, in order that the ministry be not discredited, but in everything commending ourselves as servants of Elohim, in much endurance, in afflictions, in hardships, in distresses. The context of Paul's usage here is that through Elohim's grace is that Elohim is hearing our prayer and that we are obedient in all things because of that. That's only because of his grace. Verse 14. Deliver me from the mire, and do not let me sink. May I be delivered from my foes and from the deep waters. David speaks as if he faces imminent death of a drowning man. See, I don't think this is talking about Messiah before he started teaching at all. I just don't see it. Verse 15, may the flood of water not overflow me, and may the deep not swallow me up, and may the pit not shut its mouth on me. Answer me, O Yahweh, for your loving kindness is good. According to the greatness of your compassion, turn to me, and do not hide your face from my servant. For I am in distress, answer me quickly. O draw near to my soul and redeem it. Ransom me because of my enemies. You do know my reproach and my shame and my dishonor. All my adversaries are before you. David pleads for his prayer to be answered according to the greatness of his compassion. He knows Elohim is aware of his reproach and his shame and his dishonor. Verses 20 and 21, reproach has broken my heart, and I'm so sick. And I looked for sympathy, but there was none. And for comforters, but I found none. They also gave me gall for my food, and for my thirst they gave me vinegar to drink. See, this is another one they're trying to apply to Yeshua on the stake. They tried to give him vinegar. And by the way, it says gall. What is gall? They gave me gall for my food, and for my thirst they gave me vinegar. Gall is poison. Well, when he was dying, Luke 23:36, the soldiers also mocked him, coming up to him, offering him sour wine. Matthew 27:48, and immediately one of them ran, and taking a sponge, he filled it with sour wine, put it on a reed, and gave him a drink. And you remember what this was? Yes, that's the community stick.
And plus the fact that the body he had taken to Nazareth died too.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
things there was nasty
yeah.
and against the vow that
And in Luke, it says that these soldiers were taunting him. And then in Matthew, we see what the taunting is. It's a sponge on a stick at the public latrines they had in ancient Rome. It says here we had 12 to 60 people at once going to the bathroom sitting next to each other. There were no dividers. There was no toilet paper. And there was one sponge stick for everyone to dip into the water and pass around. And, you know, we think we're not blessed. That's when the Roman latrines, bathhouses had large public latrines, often with marble seats over channels whose continuous flow of water constituted the first flush toilets. A shallow water channel in front of the seats was furnished with communal sponges attached to sticks for patrons to wipe themselves. Well, you know, okay, going back to this passage, the Brit Hadashah never uses this passage as a quote. Never does. Verses 22 and 23, may their table before them become a snare, And when they're in peace, may it become a trap. May their eyes grow dim so that they cannot see, and make their loins shake continually. This is quoted by Paul in his letter to the Romans, in Romans 11, verses 9 and 10. And David says, let their table become a snare and a trap, and a stumbling block and a retribution to them. Let their eyes be darkened to see not, and bend their backs forever. Paul's referring to the spiritual blindness of Israel. Many people, this is an imprecatory prayer that David is doing here. And a lot of people don't like imprecatory prayers because they don't understand them. When we see where they belong, we see that they are judgment being pronounced upon the lost, but it's justice. It's justice. Verses 24 and 25, pour out your indignation on them, and may your burning anger overtake them. May their camp be desolate, may none dwell in their tents. This is quoted in Acts 1 verse 20 as a quote of Judas Iscariot, or pertaining to him. For it is written in the book of Psalms, let his homestead be made desolate, let no man dwell in it, and his office let another man take. And that was apparently Paul who took that office. They drew lots for a guy named Mattathias, but you never hear about him after that, so I'm thinking it was Paul. Verses 26 through 28, for they have persecuted him whom you yourself have smitten, and they tell of the pain of those whom you have wounded. Do you add iniquity to their iniquity? And may they not come into your righteousness? May they be blotted out of the book of life, and may they not be recorded with the righteous. So he continues this imprecatory prayer. He wants their names stricken from the book of life. Verses 29 and 30. But I'm afflicted and in pain. May your salvation, O Elohim, set me securely on high. I'll praise the name of Elohim with song, and shall magnify him with thanksgiving. In his pain and affliction, David praises the name of Elohim with song and with thanksgiving. Verses 31 through 33, and it will please Yahweh better than an ox or a young bull with horns and hoofs. The humble have seen it and are glad. You who seek Elohim, let your heart revive. For Yahweh hears the needy and does not despise his who are prisoners. David could relate to the poor and the prisoners in his realm. He's been there. Okay, he's been there and done that. Did I say Paul? I meant David. David is the one who could relate to that. This is, he suffered. He suffered a lot before he became king, and afterwards. And, that's probably what made him such a great king, is the suffering he went through. And then finishing out verses 34 through 36, let heaven and earth praise him, the seas and everything that moves in them. For Elohim will save Zion and build the cities of Judah, that they may dwell there and possess it. And the descendants of his servants will inherit it, and those who love his name will dwell in it. So he closes the psalm with a look forward to the kingdom in Zion, which will never end. What questions do you have? Anything?
Question, the comment is,
Try your mic again, Cliff.
it starts out.
Then turn it off real quick if it does that. Mark's got it now.
Okay. One needs to be cautious is that, as you pointed out, some of these are, I think that's a lot of refers to the part of what Elohim, not only that Yeshua experienced.
Right.
That not every person or not is, you understand what I'm saying? It's not,
Oh, yeah.
It's just not a one paintbrush paints the whole thing.
No, it's not.
Does that make sense?
Right.
As an observation is that you need to be, in other words, see that.
Right.
Think about it and understand to whom this applies and whom this applies.
Yeah, let's go back to Jonah. Jonah experienced the things in his life so that some of them could point to Messiah. Okay, Messiah never ran from the Father like Jonah did. Jonah did a lot of things that Messiah didn't. But there was one thing actually a couple of things. One, he was in the belly of a whale for 3 days and 3 nights, like Yeshua was in the belly of the earth. And Jonah brought salvation to the people of Nineveh. Then he sat up on a hill above the city and was hoping that Elohim would throw fireballs down on him. Okay, that's not like Yeshua. You can't say everything he did. Okay, it's just some of the things are, and they point toward him. The same thing with Psalm 69. Some of the things in here point to Messiah, but not all of them.
That's just different prophets had different messages, had different prophecies
Yes.
that related to Messiah, but not, their whole life was not.
Yeah, their whole life wasn't like Messiah.
So,
Right.
Sometimes they were actually trying to tell people, hey, you better straighten your act up.
Right. Right. And by the way, 95% of Tobias Singer's objections are exactly like I just showed you. He'll go through all the New Testament and see where it's quoted and say, oh yeah, well, no, why not the verse after it and before it? And the whole chapter, why not all that? As if you do, it says your Jesus is a sinner. Or whatever, And that's, like I said, 95% of his objections. Easily answered. And I've spent years of my life looking for objections. Okay, this guy's, there's not any good ones out there. His were as good as anybody's, but I spent a lot of time studying them. I mean, if truth is out there, I want to know what it is. You know what I mean? Yeah, I do too. Show me. Prove it to me. He didn't prove anything to me. Not because I was presetting my ways either. Just that his logic and reasoning were faulty. It was obvious to me. Okay, let's pray and we'll be dismissed. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time we've had together, and we do ask that you prepare our hearts and minds for these upcoming feast days, which we're very excited about, and just even closer your wonderful Sabbath that you've given us, as we pray as your humble servants. Amen.